There's no way Taika Waititi is going to screw this up. There's no way this movie is going to be bad.
I told you so. So if this is the first video of mine you're ever watching, I normally do video essay style content. I much prefer to write out my thoughts clearly and concisely and reevaluate them throughout the process, but that's not what we're going to be doing today, because I just got back from seeing Thor Love and Thunder, and I've taken a look at the YouTube discourse surrounding this movie, and the general feeling seems to be befuddlement at how this movie turned out the way it did and how it was not as good as Ragnarok. And my thoughts on that are, this is exactly as good as Ragnarok. The second video I ever did on my channel was a video about Ragnarok and why it's not as good as people think it is. And I made that video, I laid out my thoughts, I thought I was done with it, and then this movie comes out and people are starting to say, why isn't it as good as Ragnarok? And I'm listening to all the problems they have with Love and Thunder, and I'm thinking, that happened in Ragnarok. Most complaints that people have about this movie can be applied to Ragnarok. So I wanted to make this video because a lot of my frustration when it comes to media discourse is born from a lack of understanding. Like, if I don't like something or I don't think something is right, but I can understand why someone else does, then I don't really get frustrated about it. But I do get frustrated when I see something and I don't understand the opposing opinion. And people taking umbrage with this movie and the things in it, but at the same time, in the same breath, still saying that Ragnarok was great and, oh, how did Taika Waititi make such a great film and then do such a great misstep? And I want to be clear that this is nothing against Taika Waititi, by the way, because this is why when Ragnarok and he as the director was first announced that I started having concerns about it, because if you give me Thor and you give me Taika Waititi and ask me, what is Taika Waititi's Thor going to look like? This is it. So yeah, this is the kind of director Taika Waititi is. He's one of these directors who doesn't work for me, but I still appreciate his talent. So this is not to do, this isn't even a criticism of Thor Love and Thunder, which I didn't like, by the way, but yeah, this isn't a criticism of the movie so much as a real befuddlement at the discourse surrounding it. So I thought a lot about how to go about this, and I've said before that I hate reacting to other YouTubers because I don't think it's conducive to a good discourse. But I do think it is valuable to have something that epitomizes the consensus surrounding the quality of this movie. So I thought I'd choose a video that had that and react to that. But really, I am reacting to the general ideas surrounding the movie's quality. And I've chosen Full Fat Video's review. And the reason I chose him is because I think even in off-the-cuff reviews, like, he's very, very good because he manages, even off the cuff, to put his points across in a very clear and concise way. It's like, point, this is what I think of that, this is what I think of that, this is what I think of that, this is what I think about the whole thing. So I do think he puts across the general ideas surrounding Love and Thunder pretty well. So I'm going to be reacting to him, but my comments and my issues are just surrounding the general discourse. And also, he's a big enough YouTuber that he's never going to see this anyway, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, let's get to it, and let's see what he says about the film. And I am going to be reiterating the points that I made in my Ragnarok video, because even though I do stand by the points I made in that video, that the camera work is awful, the sound quality is terrible, so I don't really want you to see it, but feel free to watch it if you want. But I am going to be reiterating a lot of the points I made as to why I think Ragnarok is not as good as people think it is, and as a result say that it's not that far removed from Love and Thunder, so I don't understand why people take issue here but didn't take issue there.
I really don't want to be negative on this channel. I want to kind of, going forward, make more positive stuff because it's better for me and I think it's better for you.
And just before we go on, I can really relate to this because I don't really like being negative either, but considering the quality of a lot of the things that are being put out there right now, it is kind of hard to search for positivity. So yeah, I sympathize a lot.
There's no way Taika Waititi is going to screw this up. There's no way this movie is going to be bad.
Thanks!
Where the trailers I really enjoyed and I thought made the film look like it was going to at least have a decent story and some decent character work. Even if some of the green screening and volume tech didn't quite look up to par.
Now, this is one thing that I do genuinely agree with, in the sense that Ragnarok looked a lot better. Like, that's the one complaint I never had about Ragnarok, is it looks amazing. And I do genuinely agree with that. The green screen, the CGI, everything here just looked a bit janky for whatever reason, and I don't really know why. So yeah, that's one thing that I will definitely say Ragnarok did a lot better, is it looked a lot better. This movie doesn't really look that great, despite the fact that the design of everything looks pretty good. But it just, yeah, it was that kind of uncanny valley thing. It felt unfinished.
And I thought at the very least, we were going to get a movie like Ragnarok, which, you know, whilst not visually groundbreaking, is a really fun time, really added to the mythos of Thor in the MCU.
Did it? So this is my first long pause, because I want to address the Ragnarok added to the Thor mythos, because I really don't believe that it did. It introduced Hela, who it immediately got rid of. It introduced Fenrir, who it also immediately got rid of. It killed the Warriors 3. And even though it did introduce the idea of Asgard's past as a conquering world, and introduced Hela, who was the secret child that Odin had locked away and not told Thor and Loki about, so that kind of messed up family thing. But it didn't. It mentioned them, but it didn't do anything with them. So no, it didn't add to the Thor mythos at all. And that was the one thing that I really took umbrage with Ragnarok. Because Thor has lived his whole life, he was raised on these stories of great, noble Asgardian warriors. This was his whole identity. And we reveal in Ragnarok that that was all a lie. Asgard's past is blood-soaked and full of conquerors and it's subjugation, and Thor doesn't react to it at all. He doesn't confront it, he doesn't think about it, he barely talks about it. It's just Hela talks about it more than he does. And yet I said this in the review, that if you introduce the fact that your character's entire worldview is a lie, you kind of have to show it affecting them somehow, and Ragnarok didn't do that. It didn't do anything. Like, Thor and Loki's dad dies, Odin dies, and we see Thor grieving that loss, but he has just been told that he has a sister he never knew about, that his father raised as a conqueror and then locked away and never told him and Loki about. And again, about Loki, we're a product of our upbringing, yes, and Loki is too, but that is not to just excuse him at all. Like, we are all responsible for the kind of things we do. We know right and wrong. So this is not to say, oh, poor Loki. But Thor should have had that light bulb moment where he thought, okay, maybe our family is significantly toxic and messed up, and maybe I get it now. But no, he he doesn't. Like, him and Loki have a very brief exchange where Loki says, "It hurts, doesn't it, being lied to?" And Thor is just like, "Fuck off," and throws something at him. So there's nothing there. It's all completely surface level. So this whole adding to the mythos, and then there's the other thing about the fact that they didn't tackle Asgard's blood-soaked history in any way, so they had to have a different emotional challenge for Thor to overcome. So they introduced this whole Asgard isn't a place, it's a people. And I'm like, was that ever in question? Thor has never been particularly attached to Asgard as a place. He was very happy to leave it all behind. I mean, he cared about his people. He said, "I will still be Asgard's champion." But he's never really had that kind of connection to the land of Asgard. That's never been a thing. Neither in the previous movies and not in Ragnarok either. So because they didn't tackle the whole conquering world thing, they just pulled this out of their arses to give Thor an emotional realization to come to, because they didn't tackle that, and they didn't tackle their messed up family history. So yeah, they just pulled this out of their arses to give Thor an emotional conclusion to come to, some kind of emotional resolution, when his feelings on Asgard were never really in question. It was never questioned at all. So it's out of nowhere. And the film still treats Odin as this all-knowing, benevolent being who, yeah, he made mistakes in his past, but he's still right and wise and good and all that, and Thor, you should listen to him. And the whole thing about the hammer. Yes, it is a good story device to remove characters from the people, places and tools they rely on, especially those through which they define themselves, but making the character arc "they are the same without it" is not just hollow, it's wrong, because of course a character is going to be different when you take them away from the thing they use to define themselves. That's the entire point of taking it away from them. That wasn't a great emotional resolution either. And the MCU knows it's not a great emotional resolution, because in the very next movie, his entire side quest in Infinity War was to get a new hammer, because...
Are you Thor, the god of hammers?
Yes, Odin, he kind of is. And yeah, I know that was a very long pause, but yeah, it added to the Thor mythos. I completely disagree.
There's lots of themes that seem like they're going to lead to more interesting stuff.
So this is my vow. All gods will die.
That are just like lightly explored.
So yeah, I'm not going to say much here because I pretty much covered it in the last pause, but themes and ideas that didn't lead to much, Ragnarok did that too. Why is it a problem now?
It's just a real shocker. I'm really shocked that this wasn't as good as Ragnarok, or at least a good movie.
Once again, I'm not shocked. And it's exactly as good as Ragnarok. No, Ragnarok is a little bit better. It does have some better elements to it, but yeah, I'm not shocked in the slightest, and I'm genuinely confused as to why people are.
And the whole reason for the second act coming to pass feels like ultimately just busy work to stretch out the time in between what happens at the end of the first act and the resolution of that problem in the third act.
And again, there was none of that in Ragnarok. Like, the entire Planet Hulk thing wasn't just busy work. I mean, they picked up Hulk and Valkyrie, who helped in the final battle, sure. But that entire detour to Planet Hulk was because people wanted to see Planet Hulk. But because people wanted to see Planet Hulk, we're suddenly not considering that just fluff and wasted time. But yeah, it doesn't really tie into the whole destruction of Ragnarok, the whole colonization themes, the messed up family themes, or even the Asgard as a people not a place theme. It was a detour. That happened in Ragnarok. Why is it a problem now?
And Christian Bale is magnificent casting, and at the very least he isn't phoning it in. You can tell he's having a merry time, and he's one of the highlights of the movie.
How exciting!
I do agree, Christian Bale was I think, the best thing in this film. I think he was amazing. Like, again, potential wasted. Just like Kate Blanchett's Hela was potential wasted. Again, it happened in Ragnarok. Why is it all of a sudden a problem now?
As for Dr. Jane Foster, wow, they really screwed that up. Some of the lines she delivers and some of the things she says just don't feel consistent with what we had before.
Again, they did that in Ragnarok. Why is it a problem now?
I never in a million years thought, coming into this movie, a Taika Waititi Thor movie, the follow-up to Ragnarok, the follow-up to Infinity War and Endgame, that 3-movie stretch of Thor is the best he ever was in the MCU. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was the best he ever was, because Infinity War and Endgame wasn't directed by Taika Waititi. It was directed by the Russo brothers and written by absolute legends Marcus and McFeely, so of course it was great. And I remember, again, a frustration I had surrounding the discourse with Endgame, and it was that people didn't like Fat Thor. I didn't like it either. I mean, I had some real feelings about this, but a lot of people were taking different issue with it than I was, because, and I thought the idea of exploring Thor's guilt was brilliant, because it wasn't just a case of, oh, I could have done something, like all the heroes were thinking. No, Thor could have done something, but he wanted to look Thanos in the eye and have him know that Thor was the one who killed him. And as a result, half the universe got snapped out of existence, and that would fuck you up. And I think Chris Hemsworth really tried in certain parts to act through that, to get that across, that he was really struggling and really just struggling with it. And I think Hemsworth did a great job with that, but the whole writing, they turned it into a joke. They turned his depression, his guilt, his weight gain, it was all a joke. And I do abide by the whole South Park ideology of it's either all okay or none of it is, but if you're going to make fun of something, at least have something clever or meaningful to say about it. That's what makes a great joke. But they didn't. They just said, haha, funny man gained weight. Haha, funny man's depressed and sad. It wasn't good. And I get why people hated it, but the whole thing, again, not this guy, but a general discourse that I heard when Endgame came out was that it ruined Thor's character arc, especially in the end when he gives up being the leader of Asgard. And I'm like, did you watch the other movies? And they were saying, oh, right through from Thor 1, 2, Ragnarok and Infinity War, and they just completely stopped his character arc and ruined it. And I'm like, no. If you look at Thor 1, 2, Infinity War and Endgame, then you can see that Thor's journey was not about becoming king. It was about learning what a king was and learning that he didn't want to be one. And this was really, really unique, because how many times have we seen the great and noble warrior just learning to become a leader and become a great noble king and all that? But this kind of subverted that, in that it said, being a king isn't this great and noble thing. It's most of the time a very skeevy job. And Thor: The Dark World didn't really do this that well, but it's still, especially at the end, when Thor's talking to Loki, fake Odin, he says, Loki, for all his faults, understood this. I would rather be a good man than a great king. And he said, I'll still be Asgard's champion, I'll still fight for her, and I will still... But if you look at Thor 1, he was started off as this arrogant prince who just can't wait to be king. And it was all about him learning humility. And then Thor 2 carried on that theme, where he wasn't really comfortable in his royal skin anymore and his destiny to become a king. And that ended with him with a resolution to that. And then if you take it through Infinity War and Endgame, that is the complete resolution to his character arc. He protects his people, he champions his people, but someone else is equipped to rule. And it's not because he can't do it, it's not because he's too stupid, or he's not that, but you have to find the right kind of person. There is it'd be like making like Captain America king or Superman king. They are amazing people, but you need a different kind of person to be that kind of leader. And again, that was great. That was a really mature and unique way to bring a hero whose destiny was to become a king forward and say, maybe his destiny was to become a king, but he's not the right person to be a king, and he doesn't want to be. He could be. Not that he's unable, he could be, but he just isn't. So it wasn't Endgame that was the glitch in Thor's character. It was Ragnarok. Because they go through all this thing of him having to lead his people, and suddenly they put him in the chair, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna lead my people now. And I'm like, that just completely, it was like Thor's character journey was just going along the road, and then Ragnarok swerved and just took it right off the road. And then Infinity War and Endgame, and even this movie got it back on track. So yeah, of course, like Endgame and Infinity War was great, but it was Ragnarok that stalled his character development. And so again, the praise for this movie, I don't get it. So like, this movie didn't develop the character, didn't bring the character forward in any meaningful way, and I'm like, neither did Ragnarok. Why is it a problem now? One thing that this video doesn't bring up that I did hear a few complaints about was the whole thing that Thor is a joke now. And once again, I'm like, this happened with Ragnarok. Any development, or what you could, if you could call it that, was entirely surface level and pretty much meaningless and wiped out by the next movie. So again, why is it all of a sudden a problem?
Oh, I think I would probably watch Thor: The Dark World over this. It at least got the basics right. It looked prettier than this. It had more practical elements. It was paced better.
This is another thing that I will say that Ragnarok did a lot better, was the pacing. Like, even if I think characterization and story-wise and everything, it was they didn't do it that well, but at least what they did do was paced pretty well. Thor: Love and Thunder's pacing is kind of all over the place. This
movie is just like gorging on cotton candy, and you're getting no vegetables, no protein.
That's what I said! That's exactly what I said in my Ragnarok video. I kind of liken it to eating cotton candy. Fun to look at and great to eat, but with no true substance. Yeah, that's it. It was colourful and fun, with great fights, great score, great music, loads of fun, but with no real substance. Once again, I repeat myself, anything they tried to put in there, the colonization stuff, the family drama, the Loki and Thor's relationship, just anything that was put in there was entirely surface level. God, not to mention the Asgard is a people not a place kind of thing. Like, again, where did that come from? Again, they set up all these other things like colonization, family drama, etc., and then they just pulled this down and said, "Oh, Asgard is a place not a people. That's your emotional resolution." So yeah, it was a cotton candy movie. That's exactly it. That is what Ragnarok was. Why is it a problem now?
The smug is already at critical mass.
So, if this is the first video you're ever seeing in my channel, what I do is I try to examine biases, because what I truly believe is that you as a person, your personality, your experiences, even the order in which you see something can affect your enjoyment of it severely. Like, just to choose an obvious example, like Star Wars and the prequels, like the kids who grew up with them absolutely loved them, and when they grew up they looked back on them with a kind of nostalgic fondness, but also looked at the politics that everyone sneered at and thought, you know what, I didn't notice this as a kid, but I'm noticing it now and it's really interesting. Whereas people who grew up with the original trilogy and wanted to see that original trilogy again, they say, oh, I didn't want to see Darth Vader as a child. I didn't want to see Darth Vader as a whiny teenager or something like that. No, I wanted to see him being a badass and everything like that. Once again, don't want to tar everyone with the same brush here, because believe me, there are more than enough legitimate criticisms of the prequels to go around. Yes, there are. But you kind of get what I'm saying, that in the sense that the order in which you see something, and something as basic as when you see something, the order in which you see it, the age in which you see it, everything just completely affects your enjoyment of the movie. And sometimes what you like and what is good can kind of just be intertwined. Like, for example, something can be objectively really bad, but because of your experiences and the kind of person you are, you like it. Or something can be bad objectively, but not that bad. But the strength of your dislike for it is really down to you. So that is what my channel is about, examining. Examine your own biases, examine why you feel this way, and is it reasonable to feel this way? And I completely get that when Ragnarok was announced and Taika Waititi was announced as the director, I had alarm bells in my head, because I was a real proponent of the pseudo-Shakespearean royal family drama Kenneth Branagh came up with. And because I thought that was a brilliant direction in which to take it. I thought it was something that made it realistic is the wrong word. Grounded. It grounded the character. I thought it was great. It was really interesting, and even though Thor: The Dark World didn't really carry it on as well as it possibly could have done, so I understand why they did a complete overhaul of the character, because people were getting bored with Thor. But I don't think a complete reinterpretation of the character was warranted, but I can see why people did it. I thought they could have just done something more interesting with what they already had. But again, I had those alarm bells in my head, and I know it's because I connected a lot with the pseudo-Shakespearean aspect of it. And those were my biases. So I am fully aware that the strength of this reaction towards the Thor Love and Thunder discourse is due to, again, the sheer smugness of the fact that I told you so. Once again, if you gave me Thor and you gave me Taika Waititi and said, imagine what Taika Waititi's Thor is going to look like, this is it. And it's all of a sudden a problem. And again, one thing that's not mentioned in this particular discourse, but is mentioned quite a lot concerning dragging down other characters in order to build other characters up. They did that with Loki and Ragnarok, and nobody cared.
A classic.
Still hate it? It's humiliating.
No, not for me, it's not.
Like there was. I know they had to do something because Loki was always overtaking Thor. People loved Loki too much, but it's Thor's movie. But you couldn't. You don't have to pull one of the villains, one of the brother and the villain down in order to build the hero up. That's just bad writing. So, but nobody mentioned it. Nobody cared. That's another thing about Ragnarok that I really disliked, and everybody was praising it. I just didn't understand. And make no mistake, it is that lack of understanding that kind of makes me have this sheer frustration, this frustrated reaction, because if I like something or don't like something and someone has the opposite opinion, but I can understand that opposite opinion, I'm like, cool, we've come to kind of a mutual disagreement, if you know what I mean. But when I don't understand something and I'm like, why? Please explain it to me. Please, somebody explain it to me in the comments, because I'm still not getting it. After everything that I've watched concerning what people think of Thor Love and Thunder, I'm not getting it. People are still saying Ragnarok is great and why Ragnarok is great, and I'm like, you just complained about this in Thor Love and Thunder, and that is exactly the same thing that happened in Ragnarok, and you're still saying Ragnarok's great. I don't understand. So this strength of reaction, again, is a completely biased perspective surrounding how I wasn't that much of a fan of Ragnarok, and I'm still not understanding why people are still saying Ragnarok is great. So yeah, this reaction is a completely biased reaction coming from my frustration with not being able to understand how people are taking umbrage with things that are present in the movie they praised. I just don't understand. So yeah, once again, final thoughts. This is Taika Waititi's Thor. This is what you praised 4.5 years ago. This is what you wanted more of. This is what you got. Why is it a problem now?